I see here your roadways are in great condition and super wide. What's the reasoning behind that, Emma?
Yeah, so we actually did a bit of work on them recently in the last month or two, just to improve them, and we've really seen a big improvement, having less lame cows, and cows are flowing a lot better. I suppose when you're talking 5 metres width for cows to walk, it really means less pushing and shoving, less competition for cows. If they're keen to come in or if they're keen to get out, they can kind of wander out at their own pace, and there's plenty of room for, you know, cows to pass out, older cows or whatever it might be. And just keeping a bit of maintenance work on the roadways means that you're going to have a lot less lameness if you're keeping them smooth and looked after. Then less lameness means cows are always going to perform better for us.
Very good. And I suppose with like such a large herd, I suppose have the cows got a lot of walking to do, say to the farthest away paddock, say from the milking parlour and to the milking parlour again?
It's actually not so bad here. The parlour is fairly central to everything. It's probably the longest walk would probably be maybe a kilometre out and same back, but I suppose we try to manage it in a way that maybe if they're walking the kilometre up to the top, we give them a short walk in the evening, and they're not going to be doing the long walks all the time. But I suppose when the roadway's in good condition, a kilometre is fairly manageable for the cows. Doesn't take them long to get out or come in.
Very good. So you kind of mix up the long and the short walkways to the parlour, do you?
Yeah, try not to be having them on long walks all the time. I suppose you'll be kind of mixing it up. Just because of the grass wedge, you'll be just going wherever's next on the wedge. So without even meaning to, you're not really going to be grazing in sequence of the paddocks. You'll be going wherever the ideal grass height is. So yeah, but I suppose if they had, you know, a long walk, maybe up to the very top of the farm in the morning, then you wouldn't really be trying to expect them to do that for a couple of days in a row. It would be probably taking its toll on them.
Yeah, and I suppose with just allocation of grass and that, then I might like say what tools do you use? Say grass measuring, etc. Do you use that? Do you have that do that on the farm?
Yeah, so we do a grass walk usually once a week. Sometimes when the growth is at its peak, you'd want to be going every 5 days, and then maybe a little less in December and January. You'd only need to go out maybe once or twice in the month to assess the growth. But we cut and weigh, so I suppose that can be subjective, so I think we do have to work that bit harder, but I think it helps when there's a couple of people on the team doing it. You can bounce off each other, and you know, we might go together every few weeks just to make sure we're on the same page about you know, assessing grass covers, and then we use pasture base for grass allocation, and we find that very handy. You know, you have the app, you can input the covers as you go around, and you can sync it then when you get back if you want, and update the wedge and take a look at it. So yeah, it really makes the job easy, and I think it's like everything, if it's quick and easy, you don't mind doing it and it'll always get done. But if it's a slow, tiresome job, then you know, it can take a while, and you'll end up putting it off.
Very good. And I suppose just in the paddocks then, Emma, say do you use like back fences or anything like that, or?
Not at the moment, but I suppose earlier in spring we would be taking extra measures to reduce any damage or, you know, unnecessary poaching. So early in spring, when we start to graze, early February, we'd have breaks set up, and you know, you'd be allocating every day based on the amount of cows that are going out. We'd work out their demand. Say it's generally around 17 kilos of dry matter, so you'd subtract, you know, the amount of silage and concentrates they're getting, and then that'll tell you how much grass they need every day, and then we can work it out based on the cover of grass on the paddock and the paddock size. You can do a quick little equation on your phone to tell you how much area they need for one day's grazing. And then I suppose now that we're into May and into the summertime, there's no need for the small breaks now. Cows are generally grazing paddocks in their hole, so probably 2 days would be probably the most, like 4 grazings, maybe 5 at a push for a bigger paddock. But any bigger paddocks, we would generally split them down the middle, just not to have cows walking over the same area of ground for a good number of days. It kind of it definitely puts a dampener on the regrowth.
Yeah.
So definitely not overdoing it is a big thing here.
Yeah.
Grazing, I suppose, it's all about knowing how much damage you can do without doing too much damage. In the springtime, we find that we can afford to do a small bit of mucking up, but in the back end, not so much. The grass definitely takes a while to recover if the land has been poached in the winter time.
Very good. And is grass being tied for you, or how have you been managing?
Yeah, we're not too bad here. Growth has been fairly consistent. I suppose 50 average maybe over the last month or so, up to 60 and closer to 70 some weeks, and then maybe other weeks down as far as 40. But we haven't been extreme weather, and I suppose that the whole farm was reseeded in recent years. When it was converted to dairy, that probably helps.
Okay.
And then good choice of grass varieties like Abergain, for example, that definitely helps to promote a lot of growth, even in drier periods or over the winter. Grass does tend to grow on a bit more than maybe older pastures or different varieties.
Very good. And I suppose, Emma, you just mentioned as well earlier that you're hoping you're planning on cutting silage in the next couple of weeks. Would you have grazed those paddocks at the start of the year, or are you going to cut without grazing?
No, we've grazed them all, and so like a lot of them will have been grazed twice and things. The growth has been pretty good, and I suppose a good fertiliser plan and getting slurry out when it needs to go out, that all helps too. So being able to contract that out, you know, because if you're doing it yourself, probably in the large scale, it's hard to make time for everything, even though you might like to do everything yourself. But some jobs you do have to realise when they need to be contracted out, and we can definitely see the benefits of that. That being done now, like the growth, the paddocks out for silage, probably about 100 acres at the moment are out for silage to be cut maybe around the 25th, I suppose, the end of the month, depending on the weather. We hope to get the first cut in. Just one paddock was cut so far, just surplus for bales. I suppose you're trying to be confident in the growth, that it's the right time to take out the paddocks without taking out too much, and then if growth takes a dip then later on in the summer, you're kind of waiting for all the paddocks to come in back into the wedge at the same time, and then you're struggling to get through them. So it definitely does take a bit of thinking, and I think going to discussion groups and following the right people online, and definitely get better tips on how to manage grass effectively.
Very good. Any involved in local discussion groups around here, Emma, is it? Or?
Yeah, so there's a local one in Mullingar here in Westmeath, and then there's also we're also involved in the West Awake one, and we find both of them are very good. And then I'm actually in the middle of completing the Irish Farmers Journal grass course at the moment, so that I'm finding that helpful too, just to get other people's tips and experiences on different farms, and just different ways of getting out to grass in challenging conditions, just to, I suppose, grass being the cheapest feed. Sometimes it's not the easiest in the early springtime. Paddocks are wet and you're having to set up spur roadways and you're always moving reels and things, but it definitely pays off when you can say that they're predominantly grass fed, because I suppose that's our whole philosophy here in Ireland, is that we're turning grass into milk, and we like to see the cows outside. The cows like to be outside, like they're happiest outside. So I suppose if we worked a bit harder just to get them out, it's cheaper for us. The cows are happier.
And your grazing year, Emma, like how early do you try and get out, and say at the end of the year then, like?
So we were out on the 1st of February, and I suppose the first couple of weeks in February were challenging. You might have to come in the evening if it was too wet, or you know, we did do some on-off grazing, so you try to get the cows out in the morning and they kind of get their allocation over 3 or 4 hours rather than staying out for the day. So you'll be trying to leave them out long enough that they've gotten their fill of grass without doing any damage, because generally after 3 or 4 hours, once they've eaten all their grass, they kind of lie down, or else they might kind of pool around at the gateway, so we'd be trying to bring them in then. And then once from the middle of February onwards, we were pretty much out full time. Maybe bar a couple of wet spells that we had, we would have had to bring them in. But once we got out full time, there was no stopping us. We've been out full time ever since, and growth has been very good. That we're always able to keep grass ahead of the cows and look at taking out paddocks for silage. And yeah, we'll stay grazing for most of the year, definitely into November. We'll be trying to stay out as long as we can before closing up the farm. So we did get to stay out into November in the back end of 2020, and
very good.
yeah, it all worked out.
So Emma, I suppose you're in the middle of breeding season at the moment.
Yeah.
Can you just talk to me maybe just about the what procedures you have in place, say for bulling? Is it tail paint or what are you using?
Yeah, so you can see probably all the cows there are tail painted. Anyone who's painted blue has already been served. So we started doing a bit of pre-breeding back in April, and we did 3 weeks where we just tail painted all the cows red. And then once you'd seen that they had been cycling and the paint was rubbed off, then we replaced that with green, just to know that those cows were good to go and were cycling. And then anyone who was remaining red, then at the end of April, we got those scanned just to make sure that they were okay. Some of them were maybe not calved long enough, and then others maybe had silent heats and things. So that gave us a bit of time to get them sorted, or find out what was the best way to go with those before we actually started the breeding season. On the 27th of April, we started AIing cows. So we have about, I'd say, just under the 70% now. We're just over 2 weeks in now, so we should be on par to reach the target being 100% submitted in the 3 weeks. We might fall a little bit short of it, just with a couple of late calving cows like everybody has, but I suppose you just try to do your best every year to tidy it up another little bit. And
very good.
yeah.
And is it all AI used, Emma, or is there bulls left off, or what way do you work it?
Yeah, so it's 100% AI, and then once we have maybe 6 weeks of AI complete, we will let out a team of vasectomized bulls, 3 or 4 at a time, with the moo call heat collar system, and they'll kind of pick up once the heat's, I suppose, quieting down and there's probably less, you spend less time in the paddock. That's when the moo call heat system is quite valuable at the end, when there's less cows and you're not out checking as much. And especially for silent heats, the bull will find the cow that you can't find, like her paint mightn't be rubbed, and she mightn't be acting like she's on heat, but actually is.
Very good. There must be a huge benefit to that, Emma.
Yeah.
And just then as well, I say, when you're selecting your team of bulls for the year, say your AI bulls for the year, kind of what do you kind of usually tend to go for, or what do you pick the bulls on?
Yeah, so we use the ICBF sire advice has been a fairly valuable tool to us. You can, I suppose you can look through the whole catalogue of available bulls, and then you can filter it. So we'd be looking for high EBI and things, and then once you put in your parameters, I suppose the amount of available bulls does drop down considerably, depending on how I suppose how selective you are. So we would be quite selective about, good breeding is definitely at the centre of running a successful dairy farm. So yeah, once you've filtered it out to exclude any bulls that might not have the correct traits that we want, then we can pick from what's left and bring in maybe other bulls, or choose them that way. So that would be like a week of sitting down and thinking about it and talking about what we want, or reflecting on last year's progeny, and thinking about the size of our cow. Do we need to go a bit smaller? Are we happy with what we have? Things like that. I suppose you're always adapting. Definitely the template for choosing them might be similar each year, but you're always looking for different things and looking at the genetics of your herd and always trying to make it better. So yeah, we did find the ICBF sire advice. That's a great tool online that anyone can use on ICBF Herd Plus, and that helps us to choose the bulls. So most of them are supplied by Progressive Genetics, and some from Eurogene as well. And Progressive Genetics are completing the AI here on the farm. So we just AI once in the evening, once a day, and it works fine. So last year we did all once a day, so it suits us here to do in the evening after milking around 5 o'clock. We'll serve whatever cows are on that day. So if somebody does a late check then at 7 or 8 o'clock, then those cows will be on tomorrow's list, and it seems to work fine for us. I suppose in the future, if we look at doing maybe sex semen or anything like that, we might have to look at changing up how we do it, or being more precise about what stage of the heat the cows are on. But at the moment it's fairly simple and it works very well for us.
Okay, and is it all conventional semen so you're using at the moment, Emma?
Yeah, all conventional, yeah.
And Emma, can I ask, is it all dairy bulls that you use, or do you also have a select of beef bulls that you use?
Yeah, so we do use beef. Generally after the first 4 or 5 weeks of breeding, you don't really want to be continuing to breed dairy stock, because I suppose they'll be too late maybe to be fitting into your replacements. So yeah, and I suppose with 400 cows and the percent of replacements we need, you know, there's no real need for us to be fully breeding dairy stock. Maybe if you were into expansion again, you might have to up the percent of cows that will have dairy calves. But generally, if we have about 100 or maybe 120 replacement heifers, that's more than enough for us to choose from. And then the rest, I suppose, once we're into June now, we'll be using nearly all beef, I'd say, in another couple of weeks, once we have the first month, definitely. And we are using beef kind of throughout as well. Maybe if you have older cows, or maybe cows that you don't want to breed from, there might have been problems in the past, or maybe older, their genetics mightn't be as good as some of the younger stock in the herd, so you might have them. The ICBF can be handy as well for pinpointing who your most fertile cows are and your most valuable cows, along with milk recording. And maybe if you have cows that are have problems a few times during the year, when you use tools like ICBF and things, you're able to kind of plan ahead, and you know, it saves time. We know when we come to actually breeding, then we have them all picked out, and Progressive Genetics can have it on their handheld then that cow was selected for beef mating. So you know, if I'm not there or if I'm busy, you know, that's all organised.
So that's all entered onto ICBF, is it? And the AI technician has that on his handheld when he comes on farm in the evening. Yeah.
So it goes onto ICBF, and then it also syncs across to Herd app. So we use the Herd app kind of as our general farm management app day to day.
Okay.
And that's very handy. Like, everyone here on the farm would use it a few times a day. Like, you might want to look up, you know, I might see a cow bulling and wonder, when was she calved? Is she long enough calved that I want to serve her? Things like that you might look up a few times a day. You'd find yourself logging in to look up different things. And yeah, so all the sire advice that we input on ICBF, that will come across to Herd app. So I can maybe, if I have a few minutes before the AI man comes, I can be looking through the cows, who they are and what they're getting, and maybe pick out cows for beef. I can be deciding what bull might suit them. And yeah, it definitely saves time, so you're able to do a better job of it when you're under less pressure.
Very good, Emma.